Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Today we have another extraordinary episode featuring none other than Dr. Burton A Clark. For those of you in the fire service, his name should be synonymous with leadership, education, and pushing the boundaries of fire safety culture. Dr. Burton Clark has had an illustrious 50-year career in the fire service. Starting as a firefighter in Washington, D.C., he rose through the ranks to become an assistant fire chief in Laurel, Maryland, and later operations chief for DHS FEMA. He's held prestigious positions such as Management Science Program Chair at the National Fire Academy and Visiting Scholar at Johns Hopkins University Center for Injury Research and Policy. But Dr. Burton's contributions don't stop at service. He's a lifelong learner, and with a degree in business administration, a master's in curriculum and instruction and adult education. He studied fire science, emergency management, and national security, and is a graduate of the National Fire Academy Executive Fire Officer Program. And that's just scratching the surface. When it comes to fire service, Dr. Clark embodies excellence, education, and evolution. In this episode, Dr. Clark challenges us to rethink our deeply ingrained beliefs about fire deaths. And he boldly states, when a civilian dies in a fire, it is not an act of God. When a firefighter dies, it is not just part of the job. When there's a fire death, something went wrong. It's a call to action, a reminder that every loss is a failure of prevention, safety, or training, and that we must do better. We explore a wide range of topics, including shift work impacts on sleep, sleep deprivation, and its silent hazard affecting decision-making, performance, and ultimately safety. We also delve into what it means to remain an eternal student. Dr. Clark is a shining example of a self-driven development and continuous learner. From challenging cultural norms to adopting proactive approaches in safety and leadership, this episode is packed with lessons that will inspire and empower you. We go into depth on his book, I Can't Save You and I Don't Want to Die Trying, The American Fire Culture. It's a compelling read that highlights the systematic and cultural shifts needed to prevent fire deaths and improve survival outcomes. We discuss the emotional toll of loss and grief, the importance of accountability, and how human factors play a critical role in controlling behaviour on the fireground. Dr. Clark's insights on the comparison between firefighter and military roles bring a new perspective on teamwork, discipline, and adaptability in high-stakes environments. And of course, we'll explore the role of technology in improving fire safety measures and challenging outdated practices. As you listen to this conversation, I encourage you to reflect on your own journey in the fire service. What motivates you to keep pushing forward? How can you challenge yourself and your peers to do better, train with a greater focus and intention, and to ultimately be safer and better at your job and lead with purpose? Dr. Clark's message is clear. Change starts with us. Thank you for coming back to today's episode of the Firefighters Podcast. Don't forget to check out Dr. Clark's book. You can find that in the links, and also visit our Patreon in the notes or links or bios for any platform on the podcast. This is where you'll find resources mentioned in this episode and resources from every single episode we've ever created. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with your crew, leave us a review on whatever platform you listen, and subscribe to stay up to date on all future episodes. Until next time, have a great Christmas, stay safe, stay inspired, and keep making a difference. I'll see you on the other side. A normal work week for us, so it's an 8-day rotation. Okay. So we'll do 2 12-hour days, 2 12-hour nights, then we'll have 4 days off. That is what most firefighters in the UK will do. The day crewing stations, or the day crew plus stations, the 24-hour stations, like I say, they'll do 24-hour shifts, and they'll do 15 shifts a month, usually. And then we also have day crewing only stations, who will just do a 12-hour day, and then during the night it will be solely crewed by the on-call or the volunteers, but everyone's paid here in the UK, so we don't have volunteers as such, but I know across the world they're still referred to as volleys.
Got it.
And those will just do a 12-hour day shift. That's most of the variations that we find in the UK.
All right, very good. Anything you can think of, we do. When I was on the job in DC, we did 10-hour days and 14-hour nights.
Yeah, there's still 1 or 2 services that do that. Yeah,
and we had a rotating Kelly day off. So, but now DC is 24 on, 72 off. So they have 4 shifts. Mm-hmm. So and they like it. Some places are going to 48
I would love
straight.
That. Yeah.
It's amazing. But the question really is, how does that impact your sleep? Yeah, and especially with the rotating Kelly day. Because then you had 4 off sometimes. So that was very nice.
Yeah, I think the element of sleep, we did a podcast very recently with a sleep expert, and it's a massive effect. I noticed when I moved from shift onto days, and certainly in the training department, lots of my general health indicators just significantly improved. But I then also found I was actually at work more, which was the downside. So I work a 9-day fortnight. So strictly my days are 9 to 5, depending where I am and what I'm doing. And then if I get called out in between that, it is what it is. But it's trying to strike that balance, isn't it? Because sleep is a superpower.
I know.
For me. I've realized it more as I get a little bit older. And it really is something that I value more. I protect my sleep far more than I ever used to. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Godiva Limited. Godiva is one of the world's leading providers of specialist equipment for emergency services market. Renowned for innovation, quality and reliability, Godiva produces a comprehensive range of fire pumps, including vehicle-mounted, portable, and their cutting-edge integrated total water flow control system, SAMFlows. I've been using Godiva my entire career as a reliable pump on the fire ground. It is such a crucial element of a successful firefighting team that you want to empower your crews with the very best, reliable, quality product. Reach out to our partners by checking the notes in the podcast. Now back to the show.
For example, the title of my book is I Can't Save You and I Don't Want to Die Trying.
Okay.
So now that was the title of the original copy. The original copy was I'll Die Trying, but the copy I sent you is and I Don't Want to Die Trying.
I've got it right here with me. No, that's not the title for it. That's just the title for this recording in the Riverside thing. Okay. But I will change that 100%. Okay. Yeah, I'll go off this. Very good. That was in a document brief that I copied just to tag this thing because we've got about 30 episodes recorded. But yeah, no, don't worry about that. Total transparency. I've got a copy of your book in front of me. I've been through it and made lots of little highlighted notes on a variety of pages. So there's no script. There's no fixed narrative to what we want to go through. I'd love to double click on a few of these aspects.
Sure, absolutely.
I'll obviously that's the purpose of our conversation, but I'll do so in a way that obviously the vast majority of our listeners won't have interacted with your book yet and won't have read it. Is there any specific things that you would love to discuss?
Well, one of the things that I'm always interested in is now that you've looked at the book or scanned it, anytime somebody writes, I'm always interested, what did that mean to you? How did you interpret that? Did it help you in your understanding of yourself or your experience with the fire service? So that's where I'm at in my life right now. I just dump this stuff out there and people can decide if it helps them. It helps me to go through that process of writing because then I get all my thoughts in line and share them. And so now I get as much out of this as you will, because I will hear what you have to say, and that'll bring us closer together and stuff. So it's all about the shared common experience. I don't know how you incorporate that in there.
That'll be an easy one because we do that. We do that on all of our conversations.
One of the ones I watched some of your shows, and I thought the one I remember was when you interviewed the firefighter. I think he was from Ireland, who was the poet.
Oh, God.
He wrote poetry?
He was great, wasn't it? I love poetry, and I know you're a fan of it as well.
Yeah, I know. And I think he was dyslexic.
Yes, he was. He is.
Yes, I'm dyslexic. I mean, when I heard that, I thought, oh, my God, this is absolutely amazing. So...
Yeah, Gerard Devine, he's a fantastic poet. And I thought it was a weird thing for us to do. But I was like, I want to throw that curveball in there. Some listeners will hate it, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I was like, I like poetry, so this will be fun for me. And if people take something from it, and I think they probably did, we've had hundreds and hundreds of emails and things about that.
Well, what I'll do, I'll also send you you could probably get it cheaper. I published a book of poetry myself, but it wasn't my poetry.
I love it.
It was my great grandmother's poetry. So I have my great grandmother's poetry. So that's another thing I work on and then her life and her poetry was turned into a play of all things.
Really?
So now the play has been delivered once and we're trying to get it delivered again. And actually on Thursday I'm being interviewed by a local newspaper about my great grandmother, her poetry, and that whole part of my life that I would never dream possible. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
I think poetry is translate through the ages, doesn't it? It's a bit like music for me in that respect.
Powerful.
It sort of crosses all those boundaries.
Yes.
No, 100%. So we'll fold in some elements of that as well.
There we go.
Okay. Shall we go for it?
We're ready.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. When we first interacted, I was looking through on your LinkedIn and it said that you'd been in the fire service for 53 years, which I found astonishing. And then I read all the stuff around.
I do too.
Yeah,
I do too.
Because it's a tough thing, certainly in the UK, for people to survive. There's a great books around surviving the fire service, and that's a bit of a play on words. But insofar as navigating that landscape, staying positive, but also enduring all of the trauma and the hard work that's involved in it. Sometimes the political landscape / minefield can ruin it for people. And I always worry when people have spent 30 years doing it and they go, oh, I can't, they're counting the days till they leave. And I think, everyone's lost here. Like, you've lost, we've lost, because you've committed a lot of your life to this and now you hate it. And that's really, really sad. And typically, obviously, we don't tend to have those people on the podcast, although I'd be open to it. But they're probably, I always say to people, like, when people are frustrated and they say, oh, the service has ruined my life, or my wife's or my husband's ruined my life, or someone, and I always say, like, you're angry because you think someone's ruined your life, and someone has ruined your life. That person is you, because you're in control, realistically, of the vast majority of things that happen in your life. But anyway, why did you get into the fire service to start with? Roll us right back, because we're obviously going to get onto the book, and I'd love to delve into elements of that and a few things that spoke out to me. But take us back to when you first joined and what was the why behind it.
And actually, the answer to that question is in the book, detailed in the book. But I'll give you the verbal. I had no plans, no interest, no connection with the fire service whatsoever. As a kid, I grew up in New Jersey, and I grew up in the YMCA system, where I learned to swim, where I was a swimming instructor, where I was a lifeguard. I taught judo, and as you know, being dyslexic, my school life was not stellar. I was never the head of the class. I had to repeat the 3rd grade. I was sent to remedial education for phonics. So school was traumatic. But in the YMCA system, I was very successful. Because it was psychomotor based. When you're a swimmer, I would teach swimming and there'd be books, but then you had to do it with your body too, and you had to get other people to use their body. When I taught judo, you had to learn Japanese, but at the same time, it was a eye-hand coordination kind of thing. So I was good at that. And then in high school, I went into the business program, and I was better at the accounting kind of things and the computer programming. The history and English, not so well. But so I went to high school for business, and then I was not very smart. My SAT scores to get into college were terrible. But I did find a small business college that let me in after high school. And so I went in, and miraculously, I went from a CD student in high school to the dean's list in my first semester in college. Wow. And it was as much a shock to me as to everybody else. But, and I didn't change one bit. But what happened is, the subject matter I was interested in, I could do work at home, type of paper, or my mother would type the paper, correct all my spelling errors and my grammar. I would turn it in, and all of a sudden I was brilliant.
Yeah.
But I wasn't any different. So when I went to college, I did very well. I got A's and B's, and I was successful. The next thing you know, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, came to my college and recruited me to go to work for them as a clerk, because they had a program where you could go to work for the FBI as a clerk when you had your 2-year degree. They would send you to college to get your bachelor's degree. Then when you were done, they would let you go be an FBI agent. So I thought, wow, I wasn't looking for that, but it came to me.
That must have been a very surreal. How does that come to one? Does it
I couldn't tell you.
Is it come in the post, or does it?
No, the recruiter came to our school, in our freshman, like in our sophomore year, and talked to us, and we took some tests, and he said, "Yeah, we're going to give you a job as a clerk at the FBI. Come down. We'll help you transfer into a 4-year school, and when you're done, we'll send you to agent school." So my wife and I, we moved to Maryland for me to go to work, to continue college, but then to work full-time at the FBI as a clerk, part-time in college. And she already had a job, so she transferred down. And so we moved to Maryland in July of 1970. And had an apartment.
When did you get married, sorry?
Pardon? When?
What age did you get married?
20. I was 20. My population, I'm a baby boomer. That was the norm.
Yeah.
A lot of my high school,
a
lot of the norm. So I moved to Maryland. I started school, and then I had not gotten my start date for the FBI. And in the federal system, sometimes there's what they call a hiring freeze. It's a political decision, right? So there was a hiring freeze, and since I didn't have my date, I couldn't start to work right away. But I had other jobs. I was a lifeguard, as a swimming instructor. So I was just waiting around for the FBI job to open up, and I was going to school. Well, up the street from my apartment was the Kentland Volunteer Fire Department. And on a Saturday or Sunday, my wife sent me up to the store. I got some groceries, came outside. The firehouse was across the street. The bay doors were up. So I have no idea why. I just walked across the street and walked into the Kentland Volunteer Fire Department. Nobody was there except the dog, a Dalmatian. Later on, I learned his name was Halligan. And so I was just walking around, and then a fire truck showed up. And on the fire truck are a bunch of young guys. They have softball uniforms on. And they get off the fire truck, and they hand me a beer, and they said, "Do you like to play softball?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, come be a volunteer fireman." I said, "Okay, I can do that." So on the spot, I joined the Kentland Volunteer Fire Department.
Wow.
And
that was selection back then.
And my selection by the higher power. And my entire career focus changed. I just fell in love with the fire service. I started taking tests in various career departments, and about 18 months later, I was hired as a career firefighter in Washington, D.C. And my entire career, Pete, has been exactly that. Yeah, my entire career has been that way. I was never looking for stuff. It found me. And I am still as excited today as I was the day I walked into the Kentland Volunteer Fire Department.
But I would love to just argue that for a second. Argue is a bit of a strong word, but
sure.
Like I always say to people, the fire service is boring for boring people. And what I mean when I say is I often get told, like, well, how did you get invited on that? Or why is that person speaking to you? Or how have you gone on this event or this trip or this whatever? And I'm always like, you'd be astonished what happens if you can remain the eternal student. I think when people reach a certain age, generally, sometimes in their 30s maybe, or when they reach certain ranks, say in the fire service, they think they are an adult, but they think they should have their stuff together. I should have it all together by now. You know, I should be a functioning professional. I put my hat on, I've got my rank markings, and I've got rank markings as well, yeah. And then sometimes there's almost a fear of maybe being found out, but also a fear of remaining the eternal student, because they feel like they're the ones now that should be given the advice and the knowledge. And I always say this to brand new recruits, like as soon as they've come out of basic training, they can start mentoring somebody straight away, because they can mentor people that are just coming in, that are someone 6 months before you. You know, if you know step 6 and 7, you can mentor someone that's at step 3 and 4. You know, you don't have to wait until you're at step 50 to start helping someone at step 2. Do you know what I mean? But remaining that eternal student. So the reason I push back on that is you have remained excited and interested. And I would say, whether you call it manifestation or whatever it might be, like those things have materialized because you're probably bringing the same level of intent of like passion and interest as you're bringing to this conversation today. And people go, wow, Burton's a really interesting guy. You know, I mean, I'd love to have him involved in A, B, C, and X, Y, Z. But some people sometimes lose that. And I don't know if across your travels, you have seen anything like that yourself.
100%.
Yeah.
And part of that, I think part of that is the problem within the fire service.
Okay.
Because we don't have a structure where you can constantly challenge yourself, where you can constantly be better, right? We get, in the beginning, we're excited, we learn stuff, but then after that it becomes repetitious and there's no more challenge. We don't challenge people. So they use their intellectual energy on their part-time job.
Yes.
I find that all the time.
Well, that's how I've made this into a bit of a trick. Yeah. This podcast is like my part-time thing, but it's like the Pete Wakefield University. This is I speak to incredible people on the side. But
the difference is you're still doing fire service stuff.
Yes.
It's not a lawn cutting business. You know, it's not a bricklaying business. You're still engaged in the fire service as many ways as you possibly can be. Because that becomes not only your occupation, but your passion, and you get your okayness from doing that. And
but I think if I did only do the fire service thing, I would really struggle. Because there are those limitations that you speak of. And like you say, there's no more challenge or development. There is, but it's very different. It has to be lateral development. And I know this might be different in the States, and I know it's different in like Australia, where logistically it's very difficult for people to move departments or even move stations, because they have to drive an extra 40 minutes, they have to drive an extra hour. But I always say to people, like, when you've joined a station, you've joined a watch, learn the 80% and then move on, because you're never going to get all of the toothpaste out the tube. And you can get to 80% and get bored, because we all will. And then there's no more growth for you. There's no more development. And our minds are little problem-solving machines. We do need problems to solve. And like you've just alluded to, articulated, we find that stimulation or that challenge, or we get a capitalist hunger to develop ourselves financially. And that manifests into something outside of the job, which then takes your focus off the job.
Yes. And I can look back to the significant emotional events that I had in my life throughout the fire service that then drove me to go above and beyond whatever the institution was offering me.
Okay.
So, for example, when I joined the volunteer fire department, nobody taught me anything. They just said, get on a fire truck. So I just sat and just waited around, right? But there's a story in my book about my first fire where I almost killed another firefighter. And that was a significant emotional event in my life. I felt absolutely terrible, sick at my stomach, because not only did I not know what I was doing, I was dangerous. And that moment tripped my trigger, and I said, there is more to being a firefighter than drinking beer, playing softball. This is a life and death discipline that I am responsible for myself. So I learned every piece of equipment on a fire truck. I learned how everything worked. I learned what it was called. I pestered people to show me how to make the pumps work. That was not a requirement. I was self-motivated to do that. And within a year, I was driving the fire truck. And a little after that, I was a training officer training other people how to do it.
I always think this with promotion is a typical one. So because of financial challenges, the economy, whatever it is, and there's a different conversation, but people sometimes go for promotion just because they want more money and they feel like they need it, and life's hard, and I get that, life is hard. But when someone comes to me who would appear to have shown no interest in promotion before, and they go, Pete, I'm thinking of going for we'll call him a crew manager or an LF, leading firefighter, or it might be sub-officer, watch manager, captain, lieutenant, as it would be in the US. And I say, okay. And they're like, what development courses can I go on? I said, well, we can put you on courses when we get you in the pool or the development pathway or whatever. But like, how much time have you spent? Because that brand new firefighter over there knows more about managing the watch than you do, because they sit over my shoulder every evening asking what I'm doing on the computer, asking how we do the pay and the reports and the leave and how we manage difficult conversations within the team. You're not interested in any of that. You've just heard that you can get more money and you think it looks easy. And maybe it is easy for you. I don't know. But like you just said there's lots of development available to people. It's kind of depends on their motivations for that development, I suppose.
And it has to be self-driven.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with MSA Safety. Today we have them to thank for the improved firefighter safety through connectivity in their brand new connected firefighter system. At the center of the connected firefighter platform is the MSA M1 SCBA with telemetry. That integrates straight in with the Luna system, which is a wireless all-in-one device creating an independent search and rescue network, providing edge detection, enhanced personal thermal imaging, while simplifying post-scene reporting and data retention. All of this then plugs into the FireGrid system for cloud-based connectivity, real-time information, and data-driven decisions for the incident commander. MSA are truly taking massive strides in the future of improved firefighter safety through connectivity in the brand new MSA Connected Firefighter platform. Now back to the show.
I was lucky enough, I was surrounded by people that were motivated the same way I was. They may not have been on my shift, they may not have been on my department, but I found them. Because I started going to fire conferences with my volunteer fire department in 1973. I attended my first national fire conference, right? So, I mean, and again, I was like a sponge. I couldn't get enough. I was only 23 years old. I hadn't even been to rookie school yet when I went to my first national conference. So it was just, I just couldn't get enough of it. And I had to pay my own way. The department didn't pay. Yeah. I had to take my own annual leave and my vacation to go invest in that.
I have to do that with all of the podcast stuff. Like, people think my service pays for it or they're behind me. The brigade I work for has nothing to do with the podcast. I always say to people that it's called personal development. The clue's in the name. It's got to be driven by you. Right. You just stand there with your hands out going, what can the brigade or the service or the department do for me? Well, I don't know. Yeah, there's a couple of courses, but maybe you can't get on the list for them at the minute. But there's loads of shit available. If you really want to develop yourself, there's loads of stuff you can be doing.
The sky's the limit. And it's even better now. And then very early on, I had completed all my requirements for my bachelor's degree, but I needed some electives. So I went to my college and I said, look, I need like 15 more credit hours. Instead of taking more business classes, can I go take fire science classes? Because there was a fire science program right next to ours, and it was being taught by Frank Brannigan, which was like a world-renowned fire service leader about building construction. So I went and took my fire science program with Frank Brannigan, and that was another shot in the arm. He introduced me, and again, there's a whole chapter, there's an essay in the book about Frank, because Frank opened up a whole new way of thinking to me. And one thing Frank said to the whole class, he said, if you want to get ahead in the fire service, become an expert at something nobody else is interested in. And the fire service will beat a path to your door, regardless of how old you are, your rank, or the size department, because you happen to be an expert on a cutting edge kind of thing that nobody else was interested in. And next thing you know, you're
I've
ahead of the
seen
pack.
this in the UK with electric vehicles and also hazmat officers maybe 15 years ago. No one was interested in it. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Or marauding terrorist firearms, we have NILOs, National Incident Liaison Officers. Very few people are interested in it. But you get interested in that stuff. Man, the NILOs work so closely with the police and the army and the special forces, and they go on some really interesting courses. But no one knows what they're doing because no one else would express an interest in it. And they're like, "What? Where have you just come from? You just been out in America, Canada? You just went to Kosovo? What?"
And even it took me 40 years to get my doctorate. Starting with kindergarten at year 5, I finally completed my doctorate when I was 40. Right? So it's the only thing I did for 35 years. But along the way, every class I took, I applied somehow to the fire service. And I learned the constructs of research and why research is so important to be a profession and how lacking fire service research is. Or just the need for, there's a whole chapter in my book on higher education. Right? And the need for firefighters to get their doctorates, their need for a doctoral fire science program, studying what firefighters actually do. I'm the only crazy guy that says that's important. But that's what keeps me going.
One. Yes. It is becoming a rare thing. But I think of the same with this.
Yeah.
There's some great podcasts in the UK. One's called The Resus Room. It's run by 3 paramedics in London. And theirs is CPD certified. So if you listen to it and you're paramedic, you get CPD points. And I think of the same with this. I'm like, I've spoken to nearly 300, subject matter experts across the world. Surely I got I know I got a lot of development, personal and professional, from our conversations and the information and the data. And you've been kind enough to send me a copy of your book. And, I flip between reading and looking at all these sorts of things. Not that it matters as such if I get any sort of academic acknowledgement for it. But I do think that's a colossal amount. But I don't think I just don't think it gets recognised. And like you've alluded to, there's no real way. I mean, we have the Institute of Fire Engineers is a global organisation that does a lot of development, but they seem to be somewhat out of popularity, I would say, in the UK. I think some of their stuff is seen to be dated, and it is dated. It doesn't make it irrelevant. A lot of the foundational elements, hydraulics, thermodynamics, building construction, a lot of the, new buildings are being built every day, but the ones that are 40 years old are still everywhere as well. And a lot of those elements are still practical with firefighters today, but I don't see the same level of popularity, in my personal opinion. People feel free to write in and tell me I'm wrong, but it's not mandated across a lot of services that people have to undertake these exams before they reach certain levels of promotion. And I think that's a shame because you should want to have a passion to be a subject matter expert in the things that you do. I think the public have a misperception of us as experts, with the greatest of respect. I always think be the firefighter the public thinks you are. That's probably a nice way to think of it because they think you know everything. Unfortunately,
though, I think the public has a pretty low expectation for firefighters.
Okay.
Because the public loves us. Right?
Certainly
we don't take
in the US.
anything away. Well, they like us, and 60% of us are volunteer, so we're their neighbors. We're doing this out of the goodness of our heart many times, and the paid firefighters, we don't arrest anybody, we don't hurt people when we come and help them, so there's no downside. So because of that, part of the challenge is we are never challenged to be better. If every fire department thinks they're the best fire department in the world, what's the benefit of trying to get better? Right?
Yes.
Even if you're a football team, right? If you're a football team, you compete and you know which one's better. Right?
There's a wonderful quote. John McDonough, I don't know if you know who John is. He's an Australian fire behaviour expert. He's a really fantastic guy. And he says that firefighters rise to a level of mediocrity that avoids further scrutiny. And I went, wow,
that's brilliant.
That's a fantastic quote.
Yeah, send me that quote. I mean, that's a wonderful quote. And even here, this is so great that you're asking me this. When we go to a fire in the U.S. and someone dies in the house fire, right? We are still seen as the heroes because we tried to save them.
Yeah.
And we did the best we possibly could. And the news media said, well, how fast did you get here? And we say, oh, we responded. We were there in 4 minutes, and we had 20 people and 5 fire trucks. But nobody ever asked them the question, well, when did you last check this house to make sure they had working smoke detectors?
No one's calling bullshit.
Nobody. And so we're heroes.
Yeah. You've got a great quote on your website. Society needs to change how it thinks and feels about fire death. When a civilian is killed by fire, it's not an act of God. And when a firefighter is killed, it is not a part of the job. When there is a fire death, something went wrong. And I read that on your website and I went, ooh, that hits home because it is so true. Yo, yeah, yes. 100%. Yeah. We do a lot of debriefs on the podcast, and it's very convenient to point the finger at, oh, the fire was just raging. It was this. The equipment wasn't this, wasn't that. It's easy to point fingers. It's hard to point thumbs.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Very uncomfortable. Yeah. Take me back for a second. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to jump on because one of the first things I did want to discuss was around, you said one of the first jobs you went to, and I feel like we kind of skipped over it, and I don't want to skip over it. So before I forget it, you had that urgency to, and I feel like it relates to what we're talking about now, the desire to increase your proficiency, your professionalism, your capability, your ability as a firefighter. Talk us through, and I know it's in the book, and again, we're going to link this in the notes so people can go and find, because everything we're discussing here is pretty much in it. Take us through that incident that provoked this.
The first fire?
This change, yeah. It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Firefighters podcast to you, and we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. But here's the honest truth. It takes a colossal amount of time, resources, the team, and work to keep the podcast going. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, improve the visuals, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. Now, by joining this, you'll not only support the future of the podcast, but also gain access to exclusive benefits. Now, if you've ever wanted to meet a member of the podcast, buy us a beer, buy us a coffee, and you think anything you've ever listened to on the podcast has been worth £3, that's basically what we're asking you for. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behavior, firefighter health, cancer risks, instant debriefs, and so much more. A growing collection of valuable resources to help you learn and grow. Now, I've only ever featured 200 episodes of the podcast on every free public available platform. You won't find the entire library because it is inside our Patreon. That is the full library legacy, and that is what you're joining for as well. So by joining the Patreon for just £3, you'll unlock everything we've ever created alongside discounts on merch like our coins, our hoodies, our patches, our tallies, and all the other stuff we're trying to crack on with doing on the podcast. Your support in whatever way, dropping it in the WhatsApp group, sharing it on the local newsletter, whatever it is, it's incredibly valuable, and we really do support it, and we need it to make it a long-lasting resource, that legacy resource we always talk about for first responders, firefighters, and everybody everywhere who's ever been interested in joining the fire service or who absolutely loves the job. Now, if you're already supporting something, as many people do, it's totally cool. You can still access the podcast for free, and you'll always be able to access all the new episodes for free. But we're asking for your help to make this sustainable. You can still listen, you can still join, you can still share it with the community. And if you want to do something free, follow us on our YouTube, subscribe to it, rate us on Spotify, whatever platform you listen to. We've reached nearly 1 million people with the podcast so far, which is just ridiculous. And we want to keep growing, we want to keep sharing the insights, and we want to keep showcasing the incredible work happening in our community and our sector every single day. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting us. We'll see you on the other side.
It's funny. It's heart-wrenching, and it was a significant emotional event in my life. So I had been at the Kentland Volunteer Fire Department for about 2 weeks, never actually getting on a call. And I was literally at the fire station in the middle of the week. The two paid guys, the sergeant and the driver, were in the watch room. I was in the TV room watching TV. And there are only 3 of us at the firehouse, right? And all of a sudden, a young guy walks in, tall guy, has an army uniform on. We introduce ourselves to each other. His name is Jimmy Panetta. He's just getting back from basic training. He was a volunteer there. I'd never met him before. He hadn't been home to see his mother. he had stopped there at the firehouse first. So, hi, how are you, yada, yada, yada. He says, Bert, did they teach you anything? I said, no, they didn't. They just said, get spare gear off the spare gear rack and get on the fire truck. That's all they told me. He said, well, come on out to the apparatus floor. I'm going to show you some stuff. I said, okay. So he takes me out to the apparatus floor. He says, look, when you come and hang out, go to the spare gear rack, find some clothes that fit you and some boots that fit and a helmet, and put them on the side so they can be yours while you're here. I said, oh, okay, I can do that. So I found some boots and a hat and coat and put them on the side. He said, okay, now I'm going to teach you how to be the layout man. So he takes me to the back of the fire truck and he says, you see this big bundle of hose with the rope wrapped around it? I said, yep. He said, that's what we call the layout section. And you're going to be riding on the back step of the fire truck, holding on, and you're going to bend your knees, and the fire truck's going to go down the street. And first thing that's going to happen is the fire truck is going to stop. The officer's going to open the door and yell, lay out. When he says that, you step off the fire truck, grab the rope, pull the rope, some hose will come off. You'll see a fire hydrant on either side. Wrap the hose around the fire hydrant, and then yell, go to the driver. I said, okay, I can do that. Back to TV we go. I swear to God, Pete, it's not 5 or 10 minutes later. The lights go on, the bells flash. It's just elbows and you know what's. And we're all running to get on a fire truck. It's the paid driver, the paid officer, Jimmy Panetta in the bucket, and me on the back step. 4 people. We turn left out of the firehouse, go about 4 blocks, turn right into my apartment complex. And fire is blowing out the 3rd floor windows of this apartment. And sure enough, the fire truck stops. Officers open the door, yell, lay out. There's a fire hydrant right to my left. I step off, grab it, wrap the hose around it, and yell, go. And I'm done. Because he didn't tell me what to do next. I had no idea what to do next. I'm just standing there watching this amazing thing, but I'm dumbfounded. I'm frozen because I have no idea what to do next. So it's not a minute, maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes maybe. The next piece of apparatus comes out of Kentland, the pumper only with driver. Nobody else is on the fire truck. So the hydrant is kind of on a grassy knoll, and the pumper can pull right up to it and kind of nose into it. So he noses into it. He gets out. I don't know him. He doesn't know me. Later on, I learned his name is Wayne Ramsey, who happens to be a DC firefighter. We become friends later. But up until then, I don't know him. He don't know me. But Wayne does know I have no idea what I'm doing because
that's obvious hose, from your appearance.
Yeah, the hose was still wrapped around. The steamer cap was still on. The rope was still there. So Wayne comes up and he bends down at near the fire hydrant and he starts taking the cap off and getting it ready. And he points to the front of the pumper and he says, you see that big hose on the front of the fire truck? I said, yes, sir. He says, bring that to me. So I go over. And Wayne's only about 3 or 4 feet away from where he's bending down to the front of the pumper. So I go over and I grab the big 5-inch hose with a 20-pound coupling on the back of it. I pick it up. I swing it around. I hit Wayne right in the head. He goes down like a rock. I thought I killed him. I thought I killed him. He's stunned. He picks himself up and he says, stand right there and don't move. So for the next hour, I stood in a 12 by 12 square, frozen in place. Because not only did I not know what I was doing, I was dangerous. I'd almost killed another firefighter on my first call. So the longer I stood there, the sicker and sicker I got in my gut. That this was terrible. I promised myself I would never not know what to do again. Because I never wanted to have that gut level feeling of just disgust in myself, that I was just so embarrassed and so ashamed of myself. I just did not want that to happen again. And I went on this tirade to learn everything, to become an expert, and I just was like a sponge, and I couldn't get enough. And like I said, 18 months later, I was a career firefighter. I graduated number 1 from my rookie school in D.C., and I never stopped that drive to always be better. And it was usually because I had some kind of significant emotional event in my life where I said, man, I didn't know that. I screwed that up. Even though I thought I knew what I was doing, I didn't know what I was doing. And so throughout my whole career, that just keeps repeating itself over and over and over again.
So I can relate to many things there, and I'm sure a lot of people can, in terms of, so one operational things that people relate to. Our recruits courses in the UK seem to keep getting shorter and shorter. So if you're a full-time, whole-time firefighter, some of them go on an 8-week course, some of them go on a 12-week course, and they arrive on stations, and sub-officers, watch managers all over the UK will be nodding along as I say this. They arrive at the station and you show them a series of kit as you walk them around the apparatus. And they go, no, the most common term, the most common phrase you'll get from a recruit is, oh, we weren't shown that during training. Wow. So you'll get to a piece, and that's not their fault. Most time it's probably true. Is that we're trying to create a really quick sausage machine because we're going through lots of retirement in the UK now, and we need to get people in. Fire service isn't as popular as it once was, certainly not as well paid, not that it ever massively was well paid. But anyway, all of these factors mean that we struggle with recruitment. The point I'm making is people get onto the stations and they don't know a lot of stuff that you'd like them to know. But today, they're part of your crew. And you do need them because there's only 4 people here. And in the UK, we ride predominantly 4 as a minimum. They're going to have to be useful. And you get to an incident. And the thing is, as soon as they start at 7 o'clock first morning, something could happen now, like you've just said about your story.
Right.
10 seconds later.
Right.
It's not like, okay, folks, well, if they were in the office, you go, well, you weren't here yesterday, you're here today, but we'll just pretend you're not here today. And you'll just shadow everyone and just go and sit with Janice in admin and go and do whatever.
Yeah.
We can't do that. You're part of the crew and you're riding breathing apparatus 2 in the back of the truck with Burton, you know what I mean? And then Burton might be super nervous because he's only just joined a year ago or 6 months ago.
Right.
And then when you're the officer sat in the front and you glance into the back because you tipped out to this apartment fire 4 blocks down around the corner, and you're like, ooh, what's my tactical plan based on my perceived ability of my crew? Because the ability of a crew is a very wide spectrum. You might have the weird Burton guy who's super passionate and knows all the kit and how much it weighs and blah, blah, blah. You likely won't. You might have the guy who's full-time electrician on the side and he's not interested. He's checked out mentally. And like you say, you get to a lot of jobs where they just don't know. And that's a shame, and that's a way that we've failed them. But I also, to reflect on another example, I've had a number of embarrassing situations on the podcast where I'm speaking to someone and I'm not prepared for it because life is busy and everything like that. And I've realized I have to, we're talking about your book today. I've made several notes on several chapters. Have I read it in depth word for word? No, I haven't. Total transparency. I've read several chapters that stood out to me. But I know that from past experiences, I'm like, okay, I'm going to come on and speak with Andy Starnes. We had Andy Starnes on the other day, thermography expert from the US. Yeah. I don't want to know everything because otherwise we just high-five each other throughout the whole conversation and it becomes a bit distancing for the audience. But if I want to consider myself to be a professional, I need to know a little bit about what he's doing. I need to look at his website. I need to look at some of his documents so that we can sustain a conversation. And for a firefighter, you need to be at that level of competency where you can at least sustain the tactical operations on this incident ground. Otherwise, you just become a spectator. And like you say, that feeling, that painful feeling of embarrassment and humility is a really great motivator for personal and professional development, isn't it? You're like, oh, I'm not having this again. I'm not sitting in front of Burton and trying to nod along whilst he, said, and I haven't got a fucking clue what he's on about because I am not prepared. That element of preparation is something that I think is very difficult for firefighters because also then they get onto a station and they fall straight into the habits of the 20-year firefighter. And they head straight for the TV room or, they want to get the gym in twice a day and all this sort of stuff. And it's hard to say that we shouldn't treat recruits. I always say you should treat everybody fairly, but you shouldn't treat them the same. Brand new recruits do need to have their heads in the books. They do need to spend the evenings looking around the appliance. And if you're asking firefighters, can you just spend an hour with me later on going through this or that? And that'll seem unfair to people because they're like, but everyone else wants to go and sit upstairs and watch a film. And I'm like, but you've got a lot of learning to do, brother. You need to get your heads in the books. It's very difficult, isn't it?
and that's a dysfunctional aspect of our culture, I think, at least in the United States, is that how we measure success is who was on the nozzle and put the fire out, or nobody got hurt. That's a pretty low bar, right? Whereas if we were to change that to did I as a firefighter perform every task 100% right 100% of the time? And if that's my standard of success, then my internal self pushes me to be better. So then the captain has to say, or the officer, did we as a 4-person team, did we perform everything at the highest possible level? Did we get 100% right 100% of the time? That's a very high bar. But the model that I share is the United States Navy's Blue Angels. They're precision fighter jets that,
similar to the Red Arrows that we have in the UK.
Right out. There you go. Well, in that industry, after every exercise, they have to sit down and they go through every decision and every action, and they have to identify everything that they missed by a little bit and how they're going to fix it next time. Because they understand there is no room for error.
Yeah.
And we as a discipline, we don't do that. We don't have that same level.
But ironically, our cost is probably still as high because they've got a very low margin for error, but their cost is just as high. If they do it wrong, someone's going to die. Yes. We can get it wrong a lot. We've got like 6 lanes to our highway, and we can fumble along it like a lumbering, poorly trained individual, and we cannot fall off the edge of the mountain. Whereas their margin for error is very small, isn't it?
Right. But then they control their environment too. If it's a bad weather, they don't go. Right. So even if it's bad weather for us, we still have to go. Right.
Yeah.
If we roll up on a Grenfell, we still have to respond to it. Right. Yeah. They're not faced with that. That's why I think our challenge is even greater, because we don't control the environment that we go to. Right. If you're a Navy SEAL, you control your attack. When you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, where you're going to do it. They don't get woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and have to be there in 5 minutes.
No.
That's not their gig, right?
I had a very interesting conversation with a service in the UK around water rescue recently. And it was around nighttime rescues. And we were saying about the challenges and lighting and thermography and finding people in the water and how easy to deploy the boats in different areas. And it just randomly said, like, well, how often do you train for that? And they said, oh no, the crews train, every week. They go to a local open water source and they train. How often do they train at night? Well, they don't train at night because it's actually really hard to train at night. It's significantly more dangerous. Right, so are we not responding during the night? I know it seems a bit too obvious, but we're a 24-hour service, and most people, we're less aware at night. People are out being mischievous at night. People perhaps that need rescued from water are local youths at a local beauty spot doing things they shouldn't be doing late in the evening. We understand, it's a bit like saying we're going to train rope rescue, but we're only going to do it on the ground floor car park. No, there needs to be a big drop. Because I can't turn gravity off. So you need to understand the risk element of this. But no, you're absolutely right. The cost for us, the spectrum of uncontrollables, the things outside of our sphere of control, is large.
That's why we have to have that 100% has to be even greater, because all the variables are out of our control. And when you look, at least in our country, when you look at our NIOSH reports, where firefighters die on a fire ground or driving or however, it's never the fact that we just didn't know how to do something, is that we chose not to do it the right way.
Yeah.
Because and we'd probably done it the wrong way before and got away with it. Nobody corrected us.
Yeah, we don't do when we do incident debriefs, we talk about it as a way to understand fire dynamics. We very rarely bring in that factor of human behavior, which, because I think it then becomes very personal and very, very emotive, isn't it? Because you're directing it at an individual. I know, but also I would say, like, in the US, and I know very little other than the people I've spoken to, so all of mine is third-hand experience, if that. There's a big culture of heroism, and the line of duty death stuff is how we should recognize the sacrifices people make. Were they all necessary? Is probably the more awkward question.
Well, you know my answer to that. I don't think any of them are necessary. And And I even there's a whole essay in my book about how we should do away with the term line of duty death. Because just by using those words, we send a message that dying is part of the job. No, they are occupational fatalities. Occupational fatalities. And in any industry, occupational fatalities are not supposed to happen. Something went wrong, and when there's an occupational fatality, the organization that person works for is 51% responsible because I control your behavior. Yeah. We don't do that in the fire service. We don't hold anybody accountable. And we call them heroes, and so we just perpetuate this dysfunction that death and injury are part of the job of being a firefighter. And
it's that line of duty bit, isn't it? Like it is your duty to lay down your life. This isn't Egypt. I'm not a slave giving my life to the emperor. It's not my duty to die.
No. And I think I've stumbled across, because I think about this a lot. And the latest essay that I'm working on, I think this happened to firefighters because we are so often associated with military soldiers and police officers. So if you're in the military and you happen to be in the Napoleonic Wars and Napoleon was your boss, Napoleon said, "Give me enough ribbon and I can conquer the world." Because what he was doing, he was saying, I can motivate people to lay down their life for their country just by making them a hero. So human nature, when we are fighting against each other, trying to kill each other, the rest of us that are in the tribe, we value there, because if it wasn't for them, it would be us, right? Yeah. So now in the United States, when after the Civil War in the United States, when soldiers became career firefighters and a firefighter died, they gave the same kind of honors to their fallen firefighter brother that they gave to their fallen soldier. Yeah. So it kind of continued that mythology comparing a firefighter death to a soldier's death. And years ago, I said, when we compare a firefighter's death to a soldier's death, we are insulting the soldier. That phrase was tweeted more than anything I've ever said. Because I do think that, right? We are not soldiers. We are not defending the Constitution. We are not defending the motherland. We are not that. And we're not even police officers. When I'm a police officer, somebody, at least in the United States, with a gun can try to hurt me, kill me. If I'm a firefighter and I go up to a house... malice
and directed specifically at you,
Yeah, right.
The fire doesn't have intent. The fire just says to whom it may concern. Yeah. It's
chemistry and physics. And physics. It's not a human enemy. And we confuse that. So what that does, it makes us want to fight until the bitter end. Like you do on a battle. We can even call it a battleground or a battlefield or, on a fireground. Yeah. But it's not a battlefield. We make this stuff up. And so it's I'm convinced now firefighters never die because of a technical problem. It's always an affective brain something that is allowing me to take risks to do things. I don't see the risk, that end up getting me killed. And it just breaks my heart because we can do better. And now, really, for the first time, this is kind of a plug. For the first time, NIOSH just recently posted on the Federal Register a request for information how to include human factors, psychology, and culture into their investigations. Because they finally realize that the way they've been doing it is not solving the problem. So we need to dig deeper.
Well, the aviation industry have been doing that for 30 years, haven't they? If not longer. They start, usually, I mean, they don't necessarily start there, but they have such strong, in my limited interpretation, checks and balances when it comes to aircraft that they get past that stuff very quickly from the black box and the inspection of the crash zone and all that sort of stuff. And then it's straight into human behavior. Show me the recordings, show me the flight checks, show me I want to listen to the interactions between the pilot and the officer or whatever it might be. And that's where we had a guy, Martin Bromley, on the podcast a very long time ago. Have you ever read a book called Black Box Thinking?
No.
I strongly encourage you to. It's by a gentleman called Matthew Syed. And the beginning of that book starts with a story of Martin Bromley and his wife. So his wife was Elaine Bromley, and she went in for a routine surgery for her breathing. She had a breathing difficulty, and it was affecting her snoring and her sleeping. And I apologize to Martin if I'm getting that little bit wrong. But anyway, it was a very routine, low-risk surgery that she went in for. Him and his two daughters dropped her off in the morning. They went to the shops to buy some tea for mummy, get her a present. She's coming out tonight. And before the operating room, they put her under anaesthetic. But straight after that, they struggled to get a breathing tube in. And the two doctors in the room tried in fact, it was two doctors to start with, and they called in a third, and they called in a fourth. And they tried many, many times, I think for about 15 minutes, to get a breathing tube in with nasopharyngeal, oropharyngeal, all focusing around the throat and the nose and the mouth to get a breathing tube in. And there was a lot of nurses there who were present, who were trying to politely encourage them to use a tracheotomy kit, to just avoid the face, avoid the head. Something's gone wrong. Let's get straight in the neck. Let's get a breathing tube in. Eventually it happened. She went through the surgery, but then after that, she went into intensive care because they couldn't bring her out. And she had something, I don't know what the number was, but 80, 90% brain damage. When the brain tissue is one of those things, when it gets starved of oxygen, you can't recover it. When parts of the brain die, it's dead. It's not like the muscles and the heart and everything. When it's dead, it's dead. And anyway, so she died, unfortunately. She was on life support for some time, realized she was going to be, for all respected terminology, a vegetable. And he had to make the difficult decision to switch her off. And he was talking to me about this. And Martin is a pilot. He flies the Airbuses out of one of the biggest airports in the UK. Airbuses are the biggest sort of aircraft that we have here in the UK, two-story things, massive. So he wasn't looking to sue anybody. Nobody got sued. It's not like the American culture as such. Not that it's bad, but someone should have been held accountable. And he said to them, like, what went wrong? What happened? Like, I need to know, because I just need closure on this, and I need to I want to be part of the investigation. I want to understand it, because he's putting his template of aviation onto that, and he's saying, I want to know, because we investigate everything, even if no one dies. Like the landing gear didn't come down, and we just had to put it on its nose on the runway or whatever. Heavily investigated, and this wasn't. It was kind of like there was complications. And anyway, through his push, it was heavily investigated, and I'll wrap this story up. And he brought into the world of the NHS, and all of nurses now go through this. It's called one crew or crew resource management. I think it's called crew resource management. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he came up with that, and he brought that into the medical sphere, where anyone, irrespective of their rank or their role, can speak up. Because you hear lots of these, and Black Box Thinking gives a number of examples where you hear these black box recordings where the alarm's been going off about the fuel for 20 minutes, and you'll have probably read some of these reports, and they had to put it into a suburb in America, and they were fiddling around with something for ages, and the co-pilot's like, sir, the fuel, we're out of fuel. And he's like, no, we've got another 20 minutes. Where's all the fuel gone? And he's like, sir, and it's game over. It's game over.
Right.
The big circular point I'm making there is, like you say, aviation have been at this human factors element for a lot longer, and it's starting to bleed over, or, you know, this was 15, 20 years ago, was bleeding over into the world of, you know, health and surgical and hospitals and things like that. But in the fire service, we're still very, help me with the words there. We're very romantic.
Reluctant to place blame or find fault.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And also we're very averse to change. There's a great chapter in your book around the change process model. I always say that firefighters hate the way things are, and they hate change. So this right. change of culture, this change of apportioning responsibility or accountability. Blame is a very emotive word, isn't it? But go deeper on that, because we do have an aversion to change and an aversion to going deep into the why behind actions.
Well, I keep when you're a scientist, I like to think of myself as a scientist. Other people may not, but you have to have observable or mathematical relations and understand stuff. So I keep coming back to the simple act of a firefighter putting on their seatbelts when they're responding to a call. In the United States, we can't get people to do that 100% right 100% of the time. And every year we have injuries and fatalities because people don't have their seatbelt on. Right? So you would think that we could solve that, but that's a more difficult solution because it has all these cultural norms in it. If we don't hold, if you've never been told you're not a good firefighter if you don't wear your seatbelt, then you don't understand that. Right? From the beginning, if you're not made to put your seatbelt on, other things take priority, like how fast you can get dressed, how fast you can put your gear on, how fast you can.
Do you know what I loved about that though? There's an environmental factor there. So coming back to the Martin Bromley story, like when they were trying to avoid frictional behavior. So when they looked at flaps down, you know, looking at all these instructions, the thing that was the flaps, they made it a thin flat handle, because before all the handles and the buttons were all the same, and it didn't create an environment to deliver the behavior you want. And I promise I'm listening, because it relates to your story in the fact that BA sets in the back of the truck. I don't put my seatbelt on, Burton, because if I'm a fucking firefighter, I'm dynamic. I need to get off the truck with my set on the back. And in a lot of UK services, we've started to move our BA sets. They're in a pull-out locker in the back of the vehicle for a variety of reasons. I actually think, unfortunately, it was driven more by contamination, because we're putting these sets back on the truck. They're still off gassing, and we're breathing all that in on the way back and all this sort of stuff. So it's probably moved because of that. But it will also have a much profound effect on people putting their seatbelts on, because there's absolutely you can't go and put that set on until the fire engine stops. You can't even get off. Right. You can't climb out the window and shimmy down the side. Right. Do you know what I mean? So, but that's, sorry to interrupt you, but that environmental element of it.
But there are ways to control the employee's behavior, right? Both engineering and design, but if you don't do that, then consequently it's a problem. One of the things I say in the United States is that if I were to touch another firefighter inappropriately, I could be fired on the first offense. But I can violate all kinds of safety protocols all day long, and nothing ever happened to me.
Yeah.
So what message does that send about what's more important? So we do it. We create the problem ourselves. We are our own worst enemy. It's not society doing it to us. We do it to ourselves.
Yeah. Well, we are society, aren't we? We always say the irony of reflecting society. We are. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, one of the things on the 17th of this month, I'm taking a course at the University of Southern California on human factors in aviation investigation.
Wow.
So I'm paying my own way to go take this class in terms of how the aviation
serendipity.
Industry,
I wonder if they bring up Martin. That would be interesting.
Yeah, I know. So his name is Martin?
Martin Bromley, spelt Bravo, Romeo, Oscar, Mike, Lima, Echo, Yankee.
You're going to have to do that a lot slower for this dyslexic. B-R-O.
My apologies, sorry. M-L-E-Y. I'll send you a link to his episode.
Bromley. Yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be great. Because he's a very fascinating bloke. Let me write that down before I forget.
Because
that.
in my first essay ever published, I talked about how the fire service should be based on the airline industry model, because the airline industry decided in the beginning that 0 accidents and zero fatalities was the only acceptable level. So until we get to that as the fire service, we're going to continue to have this problem.
The team here at the podcast are extremely excited to announce our brand new partnership with Patrol Store UK. Patrol Store has been serving the UK's police, fire and emergency communities and first responder sector since 2008, providing leading brands such as Hikes, Magnum, 511, Nebo, Op Zulu, Highlander, AKU and many, many more of our favourites. They are now also supplying bespoke uniform, PPE and station workwear to fire services around the UK. So for all our listeners that are part of your USAR, your HEART team, your ISAR team, your armed response teams, your fire investigation, your NALO, your hazmat and all of the training departments that have got your own budgets, be sure to get the absolute best for your team at a realistic price by contacting Aaron and the team at Patrol Store and referencing the Firefighters podcast. Patrol Store will also be taking part in our listener competition giveaways, as well as providing unique discounts to podcast listeners. So for people that are always asking about Hikes boots as an example, that is one unique discount code that is coming to you very soon through Patrol Store. We've also got some incredible bags. I mean, the Op Zulu bags are a game changer. So you know the really Gucci and expensive tactical black bags that everyone's using in CrossFit workouts and taking to the gym and taking to stations? Well, they've basically got that, but it's made better and costs less, because they're not slapping some Gucci expensive brand name on it and it's giving you what you want on a first responder salary. Be sure to keep your eyes in the notes of the episodes for links to unique offers and discount codes. And if you're looking to buy well and buy once, be sure to get in the notes and head over to Patrol Store UK. Now back to the show. I think we have a much greater aversion to line of duty jets, to just paraphrase that terminology for people to stay with us in the UK. But what's happened as a result of that is, so we've acknowledged a low level of competency, rising to that level of mediocrity to avoid first scrutiny that we spoke about. And then we couple that with an aversion to firefighter deaths, which we definitely should have. And what we then end up with from that equation is don't send anybody in, because nothing is worth a life. And this is, again, part of the conversation a little bit from my conversations with John McDonough and people like that is, why can't the firefighters just be better? That's, again, a very personal attack on people, is repetition, task-based muscle memory. Getting a lot better at what you're doing is going to significantly reduce your risk. Because we do still fly, you know, these Blue Angels do still fly every day. You know, our military do walk into battle with people trying to kill them, but their level of proficiency, muscle memory, and you know, sort of task-based efficiency has to be very, very high. The higher we make that, we don't have to reduce. That should actually walk hand in hand with our desire for less firefighter deaths. And everyone is trying to get better. I'm not remotely special. I'm not a bloody lonely person trying to make everything better. Lots of people are doing far more work than me in the UK to make firefighters better. But what I feel like we've reverted to at the minute, and again, I allude back to that retirement profile, lots of people, lots of experience leaving, is, there's not a lot of knowledge on the truck here. Even the commander's only been in a couple of years. We're just going to go defensive, which means we're going to stay outside. As long as there's no people. If there's people, for better or worse, we're going in. And what will happen what will happen. But the point I'm making is the back end of that is we don't quantify the economical damage that does to society, because that's somebody's home. That's somebody's business. And they may never recover from that. And they might have, again, coming back to the volunteers or the on-call, you might know that business owner. And they might have 2 receptionists that have children at the school. They might have a bunch of employees and managers who won't now have a job, and they may never recover from that. So we should still be going in my unless there is a off-gassing acetylene cylinder in shark-infested custard with radioactive waste. Maybe they're not. But other than that, we should still be going in. We just need to be a lot better.
Absolutely. And in the U.S., there's nothing that says you can't go in. If you have these kinds of parameters, you've got to do it. In our system, we're supposed to do a 360 before we go in the front door. Because if it's in the basement, you fall in the basement, But how many times in our NIOSH reports, the company goes in the front door, but they never did a 360 and they fall in the basement and die? That's...
Oh, right. No, I'd be very confident in saying 98, 99% of the time, unless it's a massive factory and it's going to take you 20 minutes to walk around it, we will do a 360. The first or second officer will definitely do a 360. Points of entry, other seats of fire, escape routes, ventilation profile, always. Always.
So that's... So I think if we try to get to... And then just because the fire went out and nobody got hurt, doesn't mean we perform to our best ability.
No.
It's about changing the measure of success. To me, the measure of success is everybody's done everything 100% right 100% of the time, regardless of the outcome, right? Because if we do everything right 100% of the time, the outcome has to get better, or we have to change what we're doing. That's the problem we don't know. We haven't done that research in terms of what is good firefighting. We don't have the people doing that level of scientific research on that. We understand that firefighter going in that front door under these conditions, the ladder being put in this location under these positions, and it's a matter of life and death, not just the occupant, but the person doing it. That's why we should have the highest level of science and research backing up what firefighters do every day.
I don't know what the proliferation of body-worn cameras is like in the US. And I promise to people listening, we are going to come back to the book in a minute, but I'm really enjoying our conversation.
I am too.
Body-worn cameras, the book's in the links anyway, people will go there. The body-worn cameras, I think, would really help this because I keep going back. I must have fallen in love with John McDonough for some reason, but he said a bunch of things that really hit me. And it says again to what you were saying there, like incident commander, maybe I do a 360. Maybe I don't. So I haven't done 360. I've sent the people in the front door, two crews, two firefighters in BA. They've gone through the front door. I've done my 360. I've come back. They're coming out, and they are absolutely hanging. So I see them. They look knackered. They're telling me it's really hot. They're telling me they can't go any further. Again, I'm not calling bullshit on that. But I don't know what they've done. Now, they'll tell me. Now, John McDonough, again, gives a great example of this because he says, if I send in two brand new recruits who've been really well trained and drilled hard, if they go in, the two comparisons of the crew, maybe the first crew goes in, they're not staying low. They're not gas cooling as they go. They haven't looked at they're not looking for the flow path. They're stood up all the time. And they go 5 or 6 meters down the hallway and they have to withdraw. They go, it's way too hot in there, boss. And I see them come out and they're absolutely hanging. I send in that second crew who is, or in an alternate universe, I've sent two recruits in first and they're scared to death and they're doing everything by the book. They're staying low. They're gas cooling as they go. They've seen the thermal path. They get to the room of origin. They put it out. I get back from my 360. They come out the front door and they say, yeah, boss, it's all put out. I'm just going to go and grab the fan and start ventilating. My assumption is the first crew in the other universe have gone to some really, really horrific fire. And there's a big fire going on in there, and I'm going to need a lot of crews, a lot of pumps. The second crew, it must have been nothing. It must have been a nothing fire. Now, it was probably the same fire, perhaps, in these alternate universes. Yep. But I'm not calling bullshit because I don't know what you did in there, and I don't know what you didn't do. So, like you're saying there, that level of success, and unless we've got a body-worn camera that we can pull it all down, not to point fingers, but it is kind of pointing fingers, but to help you get better, because go, well, why did they do that and you did this? How did they have such a higher level of success and they kept it the room of origin? And in this universe, we lost the whole building.
And the whole idea about telemetry, right? Today, you can have telemetry all over your body. So the guys that went in standing up, when we also know that telemetry at their knees is 1,000 degrees less, get down, get lower, So we're not using the science and research that we could be using to perform our firefighter duties better. And particularly with the whole AI thing, and this video is being loaded up to the cloud.
Yeah.
Right? So there's no loss in time. Why aren't videos loaded up to the cloud on the incident that the incident commander immediately has?
There's a good sound system in the UK. I don't know if you guys use it over there, where a member of the public they get a link sent to them. So you text this number. So you ring the fire service, you ring the 999 911. It sends you a link. You click on the link and it gives that access to your phone camera. And you can look at it, right, holding it up. This is what I can see. This is what I can do. Oh. And the incident commander can look at that on the way on their tablet.
Wow, I don't know that exists.
Rather than the control operator saying we had Kirk McKenzie, who's a gentleman, if you don't know, he's US based, and he's a fire technologist, I think he describes himself as. He knows far more about this than I do, and there's a number of other systems. Apparently some of these are present in the US. And again, you can get all of that information uploaded straight onto it, and it gives you a GPS of where that person is stood, and you can ask them, and you can also do it from inside the building. So if it's a survival guidance call, person say, I'm in the front bedroom, right, I'm sending you something, click on this link, right, click on that. I'm here in this room. Because if they say the smoke's coming in from underneath the door, okay, like how? Do you know what I mean? Is it wispy? Is it pumping? Is it pulsing hard? Show me the room. Right, just hold it up to the window. Yeah. Okay, so you're not on the second floor, you're on the third floor. And okay, you're from that profile of the building. So we know exactly where to go and exactly how to get you. Do this, I'll stay on the call with you. And the incident commander can see that. These technologies, but the point I'll come back to, and the point I'm making is this isn't available to us, as you say, even though the technology is out there, because we're the public sector. We don't make any money.
Right.
So no one invests in us because there's no ROI on the investment into the fire service, other than you'll save some more lives. But that isn't a number.
But at least in the United States, the biggest budget items is the military. There's no ROI on investing in the military either, but there's a lot of money invested in that. So people do understand, and that
the
military
war machine is a big money maker.
Exactly right. So we need to tap into those kind of things. If we just ask for it, we could be a lot ahead of the curve. And we just have to start thinking that way, about thinking ahead, not being reactive, but proactive in terms of how things can be used. And that's where that whole higher education infrastructure needs to come from, because those schools of higher education, that's where they need to be doing that cutting edge research that then trickles down to the rest of us in terms of how we practice every day. And most industries have that.
We are getting a better relationship with academics in the UK, to be fair. I really enjoy, and you're kind of a beautiful hybrid in that you have a fire service experience and career, but you're also heavy into your academia. I love having academics on the podcast, even if they don't have obviously they have a connection to the fire service, because usually they've done a study of some form. But they have issues proliferating and distributing and disseminating that information, because it's often written in not a terribly digestible manner. And knuckle-dragging firefighters like me struggle to read it, because academics write papers for other academics, because that's how they get approved and published. And then that information doesn't tend to trickle down because it's not digestible. We can't read it. We don't know what we're supposed to take away from it. Whereas I love having them on and asking silly, simple questions from my perspective. And they're really fantastic. Not all of them, actually. Some of them are very poor communicators, but they tend to not want to come on a podcast anyway. But the ones that really can communicate it, that's where beautiful hybrids like yourself, I'm like, these people, these inserts into our sector are very, very helpful, because academia, they get a lot of grants for studying a lot of stuff. So make friends with them, because it looks really nice on their CV to do a study for the fire department. And invite them to dinner. Let them ride on a fire truck. Give them a helmet. Yeah. They'll do anything for you. But I'll give you the perfect example. In the military, at least in the United States, we have a place called DARPA, Defense. Anyways, it's where they do the skunks works kind of stuff, and looking for cutting edge. We don't have that in the fire service.
So, but we do need it. And
Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA. I couldn't remember what it was. I've just found it. Yeah, it's okay.
Anyway, so for example, I just wrote an article about lithium-ion batteries, but I said the lithium-ion battery, the research for that was done in the early 70s, and in 2019, the guys that created that won the Nobel Prize in 2019. Well, in the early 70s, the fire service was worried about lightweight steel and lightweight wood construction, and we weren't thinking about that. So I said, okay, what's the next thing that we're not looking at? And for some reason, I get a newsletter from MIT. And I get this newsletter from MIT about this professor that's created plastic that's as strong as steel. And the professor said, this plastic could be used for coatings on computers and telephones, or you could actually build buildings out of it. And the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I said, what happens if that plastic is exposed to unwanted fire? Because you and I know plastic doesn't hold up well when it's heated up.
And when it is heated up and stuff starts to come off it, there's some very toxic gases.
Yeah. So here is something that's just been invented, and they didn't think this was possible. So this is breakthrough technology for plastic. That could be a problem in 2060.
Yes, sir.
And who in the fire service is thinking about that? So if I were a new recruit firefighter, I would want the job to be detailed every 6 months or so to MIT to sneak around all the laboratories and light shit on fire to see what happens to it.
Yeah, I think we should be. So we're starting to learn these lessons from things like Grenfell, where we need to have a seat at the table with these construction companies and with the world of structural development, because again, like back to the Grenfell analogy, the whole stay put policy is based on a belief it's never going to go wrong, Burton. Look, it's like you're saying, what are we going to do if an asteroid collides with the world? It's never going to happen, Burton. I've done the maths, all right? I made the building. It's safe.
Right.
By you saying the what if, you're insulting me. It's the Titanic analogy. What if it, no, it's never going to. We don't need all those lifeboats because it's never going to. Have you seen it? It's incredible. It's a massive steel vessel. Okay, but what if it hits something and then something goes wrong? Do you know what I mean? We need to have a seat at the table with these companies because it's a bit like your kids saying they're doing a science experiment in the back bedroom. And you go, oh, cool. Just let Daddy have a quick look at what you're going to do. That sounds exciting and interesting.
Yeah.
Because when it goes horribly wrong, it's Daddy's problem. Yeah? And the fire service is Daddy in this analogy, or Mummy. But it's we've got to deal with it. So please involve me in what is in your science project. Because I'm going to have to, you'll go, oh, I don't know. I mean, it was never supposed to happen. I know, but right now it's an emergency. It's time critical, and I've got to do something. Oh, well, I mean, Pete, this shouldn't have even happened. I'm not asking you if it should have happened. It has happened. And you've not told me what to do because you've gone off and you've built a whole science laboratory in the back bedroom, and during the night it's exploded. And you're not here, and we're left with it. That's like just the perfect analogy, not perfect, but it's just one analogy of what everything rolls downhill. You know what you call the ambulance for. You know what you call the police for. Most of the things, the fire department has to deal with it in some capacity or another. And we roll up with a big red toolbox and go, ooh, let's mackle together a plan. Don't know massive amounts about this weird thing that's happening. Let's try and fix it.
And it's getting worse every so often. It's continually getting worse.
100%.
Yeah,
so we're talking there.
It's risking more and more people. When it's a police, it's one criminal. He may have a gun, but he's going to run out of bullets. If it's an EMS call, it's one patient or maybe a couple, but it's not getting exponential. Whereas if there's a building on fire, as long as there's heat, fuel, and oxygen, it's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And it could all of a sudden
indecision is a decision in itself, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's like I think of this. We have a lot of we call them direct entry in the UK. A lot of officers coming in on like a 2-tier system. where they're coming in, they're academics or they've been a manager or a leader in a different sector, and they're coming into the fire service and they're coming straight in at officers. They've never been firefighters. Okay, probably a different debate. We can have that conversation another day. But they have been doing a lot of level 2 incident command courses, and I've been talking to a lot of them, needing all the information. So a fire is like hitting a moving target, because absolute certainty is only available to you in retrospect, in hindsight. You get 85, 90%, maybe only 70, and you've got to make a decision now. Sometimes you've got to go with what you've got. You can't wait for all the information, because by the time you've got all the information, the time, you've absorbed it all, you've digested it all for 10 minutes, and now it's changed because the next building's caught or the fire's developed. You're hitting a moving target. So you need to be able, because indecision is the point I was going to make. Indecision is a decision in itself. You're deciding not to act. And this isn't going to stop. Similar, I suppose, to paramedics or police. That person's still going to run around, and eventually they'll run out of bullets and they'll either shoot themselves or they'll just hide somewhere and we'll go and get them. And a person, they might bleed out eventually and they'll die. So even with the ambulance, they do have to make a decision. But with us, we definitely have to make a decision now.
Yeah.
We can't wait and see how this thing plays itself out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to add, about the Grenfell piece. One of the most important aspects, and I read a lot about that too, and part of the investigation that I thought was interesting, they found out that how they had trained your either 911 operators or your fire department operators had changed. Because in the beginning, apparently the 911 operators actually did live scenarios with real people on the other end of telephones. So they were able to have this conversation back and forth. But as time went on, to save money, all they did was watch a video. They actually never had an actual conversation with somebody on the other end of the telephone.
Watch a video and learn a script.
That was one of the issues, that a lot of people didn't leave their apartments early enough, because the standard was stay in place, stay in place, stay in place. They didn't know that they could say, yes, get the hell out.
Yeah.
Right? So that was that human factors kind of stuff. They were doing what they were taught, but what they were taught was not the right thing to be teaching. And at the time,
I think of it like the
justification.
German Holocaust thing. It's a bit of an exaggerated example, but I've read some pieces from interviews with some of the German soldiers, and they always said, "I was only following orders. I was just following orders." Didn't it feel like what you were doing was wrong though? Didn't you have something in your mind where you're like, "This is wrong. Like, this person's telling me my room is the room I'm in is on fire. Stay put." Right. I'm not saying that's what people said at Grenfell. I've not listened to all the calls, but I'm just, my book says stay put. I'm just following orders.
Human behavior is very challenging. We can be led like sheep very easily.
The old monkey study in Monkeys in the Cage? Where all the monkeys get replaced and they just keep doing it and no one knows why we're doing it. That's firefighters. Who was my recent guest where he talked about wetting the wheels? You remember that one?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So you had to get the horse shit off of them. But also keep them from...
keep them from expanding and the spokes popping. And then they go to rubber wheels and they're still wetting the wheels. And I just think, oh my God, this is the fire service.
Exactly right.
I want to change gears for a second. Because we spoke about poetry before we came on. And I'm looking in the book, and one of the things that I highlighted, because obviously it would stand out to me for someone that loves poetry, was the Don Merrill piece around looking the other way.
Ah, yes.
I don't know if it's in front of you or not, if you have it recalled to memory. If you can recall it, I'd love for you to take us through it and just talk to us about what that means to you. To give yourself a second, I'm just going to take my jumper off as well, actually, because I'm a little bit warm.
And this was used by permission. Don Merrill is he works in the chemical safety industry. And I was talking about seatbelts and safety and stuff. And one of the students in class said, "Hey, Bert, you need to look at this poem." So I got a hold of it and I asked Don if I could use it. Don does lots of poetry, And it was just absolutely brilliant. And I thought it fit so well. It was impacted me, so I'll be glad to read it. You ready?
Yes, sir.
I chose to look the other way. I could have saved a life that day, but I chose to look the other way. It wasn't that I didn't care. I had the time and I was there, but I didn't want to seem a fool or argue over a safety rule. I knew he'd done the job before. If I called it wrong, he might get sore. The chances didn't seem that bad. I've done the same. He knew I had. So I shook my head and walked on by. He knew the risk as well as I. He took a chance. I closed my eye. And with that act, I let him die. I should have saved a life that day, but I chose to look the other way. Now, every time I see his wife, I'll know I should have saved his life. The guilt is something I must bear, but it isn't something you need to share. If you see a risk others take that puts their health or life at stake, the question asked or the thing you say could help them live another day. If you see a risk and walk away, then hope you never have to say, I could have saved a life that day, but I chose to look the other way. Don Merrill, 2003.
If you're a regular listener to the podcast, then chances are you are big into your own personal development and the development of firefighters around you. So I wanted to remind you of our mobile app Drill Book. This is a free training and development resources made by firefighters for firefighters. Heading on to Drill Book, you will find incident debriefs, radio messages, knots and lines, quick reference guides, quizzes every single day. We've got useful links to the ERG, to Web Rescue, to JESIP, Euro Rescue, 10-second triage, National Operational Guidance, and not to mention our daily quizzes where you will find questions on extrication, casualty handling, breathing apparatus, fire development, water rescue, rope rescue, you name it. It is the go-to resource if you've got a spare 5 minutes on the firehouse to develop yourself and those around you. Not only that, if you're looking to get into the fire service, we've got advice on there on interview questions, interview answers. You can build your own questioning in there. And again, remember, this is built by firefighters for firefighters, so you can add your own drills in there. You can pick the drills that you find the most favorite. There is literally hundreds of training ideas, hundreds of drills in there. Remember, this app is absolutely free and it grows every single day down to the contributions of our thousands and thousands of users. It's freely available on Android, Apple, and you will find it in the links for this podcast. Remember, it's called personal development. The clue's in the name. You've got to work twice as hard on yourself as you do on the job. So always be growing, always be developing. Now let's get back to the show. I love that. And I hadn't heard it before I read it in your book. It is such a powerful piece, and I think everyone listening can relate to that in some capacity or another, in their personal life, in their professional life. Obviously, it lies amongst the conversation of seatbelts within the book, in and amongst a few other topics. Oh, yeah. But you're so right. And I think of one of my favorite quotes around, what you permit, you promote. What you walk past is what you accept, whether that's rubbish on the floor, whether it's the flat tire that you've seen on the truck, the person in the back not thoroughly checking the BA set before they hand it over to the next shift. All of those things, very, very emotive. And that's that self-accountability, isn't it? It's that self-discipline. Yep. And sometimes as well, if it's something that's not within your sphere of responsibility, although that's an interesting topic for conversation as well. What is our sphere of responsibility? It can provoke a difficult conversation. And I think we're getting worse at that, unfortunately. I think we shy away from difficult conversations. Part of the reason I love the podcast as well is the art of conversation. I think we're losing that as we move into more of a technological, electronic age. I think we're losing the art of conversation. That aspect of walking past something, that aspect of I could have saved a life today. I mean, I know it echoes on some of the topics we've already discussed, but is there anything you want to expand on from that? Because I want to ask you about Brian Hunton next. So before we move on to that,
I think the poetry stuff, it goes to that affective part of who we are. It's our emotion, it's our values, and they are put into us from the time we're born to the people around us to the tribes and cultures we're in. So we should not be afraid to challenge ourselves. If I feel something emotional, I try to ask myself, why am I feeling this? Where is this coming from? especially if it bothers me, or I'm rejecting it or pushing back, or it makes me feel bad. I have to say, why is this happening? Where is this coming from? So I can continually learn throughout my life. About 18 months ago, my wife died, and I'm still dealing with that. But up until then, I thought I knew what the definition of grief was. But after my wife died, that was a new experience about grief that I had never had before. So that happens throughout our whole life. We never stop learning, because the experiences we have impact us. We have to take that in, understand it, and then utilize it for our own development. And the loss of my life was such grief, but now I come to understand the love we have even more, and I learned to love the kids and all the grandkids and great-grandkids more, because now I know what it means to lose them. And I couldn't have known that before. So poetry helps us do that. Thank you. Poetry helps us do that. And the science and research is fine, and that's always good. But there's always that affective domain in terms of why people think the way they do, why they feel the way they do, why we behave with each other the way we do. I mean, the war going on now is just terrible. But that's all about emotions and beliefs and all that kind of stuff. That's what drives people to do those terrible things to each other. And we all have to strive to try to be better. So I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but that's...
No. That's a beautiful tangent. And I wanted to let you finish it, because there's also an element of, like you said, I think that when you think of a community and the people that you're around, they always say, it takes a village to raise a child. And as you go through life, you enter into different villages, different groups, different environments, different organizations. Your relationships change and evolve. Your children grow. Your self-awareness, hopefully, continues to grow as well. And it's that old saying of, no man ever enters the same river twice, because the river has changed, right, and so is the man.
Yep.
And as you experience loss through life, as you experience setbacks, the way you perceive that, the way you can deal with it, what it means to you, the way you try and understand it. Loss for children is very difficult, because I think it's difficult for everyone. I've never had an experience like yours, and my heart goes out to you and your children, your family. But I've never experienced that, so I've only got my own template, and it's so difficult for children because they have very little context. But also, we're always children,
Yes.
When you're a child, you only know everything that you're around. So when you're on a fire station, to take it back to that analogy, you only know the expectations, the behavior, and the culture, and the standards of where you are. You don't know what wrong looks like, because your perception of wrong has been dictated to you by the tribe that you're around. But when you have that incongruence, like you've said, you see something, why am I having this internal conflict? Something about what I'm seeing doesn't feel right. Something about what I'm hearing doesn't sound right. And the ability to challenge that in a healthy manner, like the seatbelts, like the walking the other way, like the not challenging in an appropriate manner just because it's the way it's always done. And then having the guilt of that retrospective, I could have saved the life one today. That is a very difficult thing for people to go through. I want to move on, if we can, because I'm conscious of, I'm not conscious of time, other than in an hour or so I need to go and put my children to bed. And that's a thing that I've gotten a lot better at, is making that a priority. Because I've always said, that's a lie actually. I learned a little while ago from a mentor of mine. The only people who will remember that you came in on the weekends and worked late are your children. No one else will care. All right? No one else will care, but they will remember it. People won't go, Pete was extra hard worker. He was a guy that didn't spend time with his kids. Yeah. So anyway, there's a slight time cap to that, but with plenty of time. We killed Brian Hunton. Very emotive part of the book, and it again echoes back on the conversation that we were talking. But I always say people learn through stories, and that's how the Bible was written. We learn through the fable. Could you go into a little bit of detail on that? I appreciate I may be asking you to repeat certain elements of what you've already said, but I did find it an emotive chapter for me.
There's a whole, like I said, there's a whole chapter in the book just about seatbelts, because I think seatbelts are the best scientific model we can use about the dysfunctional aspects of the fire service culture and what has to happen if we want to change the culture. Because ultimately the answer is you put your seatbelt on or you don't put your seatbelt on. And until everybody decides we are going to put our seatbelt on, we have work to do. We can fix that dysfunction. But it's not as easy as just clicking something, because there's the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor part of it. And the part that's the most difficult is that psychomotor part. And as soon as there were seatbelts in fire trucks, I started wearing mine. I don't know why. Could be because of my lifeguard background. You follow the rules. But then I can literally remember when Brian died. He was a firefighter in Amarillo, Texas. And they were going to a call, and he was getting dressed, and he bumped the door, and he fell out, and he died like 3 days later. And in his obituary, it had talked about how Brian had just a few months earlier been to the National Fire Academy taking our firefighter safety and survival program. And even though Brian was not my student, and I read that, I literally sat at my desk and I was crying, thinking, how is this possible that we're doing all this highfalutin stuff here at the National Fire Academy? He came to us, and still, he fell out of his fire truck and died. I felt that, even though I didn't know him, I felt that personally, and I just couldn't get it out of my mind. And that's when I started.
People that are unfamiliar with his story, sorry, could you just go into the context, because you alluded to it there. How did he actually die?
Well, they were responding to a call. He was getting dressed. He bumped the door. It opened up. He fell out, hit his head. He was in a coma, and 3 days later he died. And like 6 months or 9 months before that, he had come to the fire academy and taken a class on firefighter safety and survival. And it was just a fluke accident but he didn't have a seatbelt on. And so that was, I was just felt so bad. And I remembered how Mothers Against Drunk Driving had gotten kids to sign a pledge not to drink and drive. So I thought maybe I can get firefighters to promise to wear their seatbelt. So I started the National Fire Academy Brian Hutton Seatbelt Pledge Campaign, and I just took it from class to class, telling the story and asking them to take the pledge to wear their seatbelt. And next thing you know, that thing takes off. It gets national attention. We do it all over the country, and we start the whole campaign to get firefighters to put their seatbelts on, because the purpose of the National Fire Academy is to increase the professionalism of the fire service. But if we can't increase our seatbelt professionalism, what are we doing? So that was a personal challenge to myself. I felt the same way as when I hit the firefighter in the head with the coupling. I'm not doing my job. I'm failing because I just could not change one behavior of firefighters wearing their seatbelt. And I went on this massive campaign to get firefighters to put their seatbelt on, and it got traction, and it started a national conversation. And we've been doing it for 20 years, but we still haven't accomplished that simple mission worldwide.
Is there, to going back to our conversation around the, so it's learning to come at these challenges from lots of different angles. There's a great, have you ever read a book called Switch? The Switch?
No.
Write that one down again because I think you'll enjoy it. There's an analogy in there where it talks about the elephant and the rider. And I've said this before on the podcast, so I apologize for people that already know it. The elephant and the rider talks about your two motivations. So the rider is you atop your emotions. The elephant is your emotions. So you can logically understand, look, Bert, and I get it. High speed, big metal thing, hits another thing. I'm not wearing seatbelt equals dead. Logic. Get it. It holds me in the thing, door comes open, I don't fall out the thing. The thing goes upside down, I don't roll around like a tool in there. But the emotion is the elephant. And if we can't, and this is why I think we learn through stories, and I thank you for sharing that one there, because we need to be driven by emotion. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. I have to either have skin in the game. Firefighters change a lot of their decontamination behavior after they know of a firefighter that's got cancer or had cancer, and they see the carnage and the destruction that it causes to them themselves. They most likely die, and their family and their loved ones. And they go, yeah, no more. I'm going to do decon properly. I'm not bringing my kit home. I'm not putting my bunker gear in the boot of the car straight after shift or any of that shit. Stops today, because it's that latent effect. It's why, you know, some people smoke, we eat really badly, because it's a future problem. And also the seatbelts is a future problem. I've not me, but like, if you give an example, person says, I've had thousands of journeys, Burton, without a seatbelt, and I'm not dead. So every time I do that, I perpetuate the belief that I don't need to do it. But so it's a distant problem until it's a right now problem, until it's sat in front of the doctor. You've got cancer. Oh, what can I do to? No, sorry, that was a 20-year ago conversation. What could I do to avoid this? And straight after the crash, it's no, putting your seatbelt on. That opportunity's gone, actually, because you're already paraplegic now. That's game over. So the elephant and the rider speaks to that and that emotional side of it. And that's why I think it's important to share those stories, because it drives the emotion within people. But then there's also technological aspects around. Sorry, go on.
Well, before you leave that, let me add this, because the same firefighter most likely wears their seatbelt driving to the fire station. They would never let their kids be in their car without being a seatbelt or a car seat. So something in the fire service has switched that in their brain. And I think that's the whole idea of our fast, close, wet, risk, injury, and death DNA. That fast thing trumps everything else. Firefighters think they need to be fast. And if anything gets in the way of me being fast, I am going to ignore it. Because we reinforce the construct of fast. Who was the first one to get to the fire? Who was the first one to have the nozzle on the fire? You know, we timed them in rookie school putting their gear on. It's a competition, right? So we put this notion that you must be fast to be a good firefighter, so much so that you got to have your SCBA on when you get out of the fire truck so you can catch the baby being dropped out the window kind of crap. You know, when we need to back up, no, you need to put your seatbelt on, right? Yeah. Fighter pilots don't take off unless they've got their seatbelt on. You can't be more aggressive than a fighter pilot, but they put their seatbelt on, right? So
I would also argue is there not more mechanical things in there that stop them for, like, because I know we have, and these aren't. I mean, even we're behind in the electronics in our fire engines. Like, there's weight on the seat. The seatbelt isn't on. Oh,
all kind of stuff.
The fire truck doesn't move. That would be great. You have that in a lot of, like, my car has a horrible noise in it that means that if I'm not wearing a seatbelt, I can't, and it just gets louder. Even if I'm just moving the car off the driveway, it's a horrible noise. Now people go, yeah, but you know, you can plug your seatbelt in and just ignore that and then sit on your seatbelt. It's actually quite uncomfortable. I think if we made seatbelts very uncomfortable to sit on, maybe, I don't know, but I'm sure people would just wrap them in cotton wool and then they'd get over it that way.
Know, it's, I was going to say, another case study that's in the book is that there was a fire department there's a big metropolitan fire department, 1,000 plus firefighters, lots of fire trucks, and a fire truck was going on an EMS call, hit a curb, lost control, hit a tree. The officer was ejected out of the front of the fire truck, went through the windshield. Didn't die, but was just messed up. So now they go and they inspect the fire truck. The horn connections were disconnected, so the horn wouldn't work. The firefighters actually crawled under there and disconnected the alarm, so the alarm would not go off. Then they inspected all the fire trucks in the department. They found 19 fire trucks where the alarms had been disconnected or circumvented somehow. And in one of them, the firefighters had actually crawled up under the dashboard, taken the horn out, wrote to the manufacturer, and got a horn that the decibels were so low you couldn't hear them, and put it back in. So my question is, how many people in that organization had to know that condition existed? A lot of people. A lot of people. So those firefighters not wearing their seatbelts, that was okay. That construct and that affective domain was put into them by the organization. That's why we have to, the organization has to change, because the organization controls your behavior.
And how many people were disciplined as a result of it, I would imagine? Probably not as many.
I don't think any, probably none. Probably none.
Yeah. It's, there's also a lot to do in the vehicles. And I think about this when you were saying about being fast and efficient. You sit in the back. There's everything around you. I'm sat as an officer in the front and I'm going, hey, just have a look at the hydrant route and tell me what the clearest thing is to this. Okay, we're going to this building. Just bring up the risk profile in the back. Bring up the risk plan, site-specific risk information, and talk me through this. I can't hear you. Okay, I'll take my seatbelt off and I'll lean forwards and lean over the front and talk to you. Because it happens. Right, just make sure you've got a thermal imaging camera. Just stick a radio on, guys. We're going to go on channel 3. And everyone's moving around and everybody's doing everything in the back. If there was less stuff to do in the back, you're just a passenger. Arrive safely. When we get there, we'll fix the problem. But no, the more you talk, the more concerned I become actually about the state of play, even here in the UK, right. and the way that we approach a lot of those things. I was looking through the book around people that have come before us, and you've got some great stuff in here about test your legacy potential, and then also page 235 is around legend failed probation. We do all stand on the shoulders of giants, talking about that first aspect of legacy, and I always think, is your career or your life, is it going to be an example or is it going to be a warning? Are we going to say, do you remember your granddad Burton? He used to smoke, or he never wore his seatbelt, or he whatever. Is your life going to be a warning, or is it going to be an example? I use example as the positive side of the coin in this analogy, because the people that have come before you have set the precedent, and science, they say, evolves one funeral at a time. Because only when Burton dies can enough people say, "Oh, he was full of rubbish. That was completely wrong." But he got an Academy Award for it, or he got a Nobel Prize. So we can't move on until he's gone. And I think the fire service is in much the same way. People have a lot of emotional investment in the way things are, because I put that policy in place, Burton, actually. And if I'd have known better, I'd have probably done better. But I've kind of already set my stall out now. And you're attacking something that's got my name on it. Talk to me a little around legacy and what that chapter meant to you, and then perhaps we can move on to the failed probation.
Well, the legacy chapter, we were coming up on the transitioning from into the 2000 for the first time, and Fire Chief Magazine went back and they identified these 20 most influential fire service legends. And many of them I had known because they were my instructors. Some I didn't know. So I thought, well, what did these people have in common that let them become a legend in the 20th century? So I went back and I looked at their biographies and their backgrounds to try to identify what is it that they did that we could learn from if we want to be a legend in the 21st century. The subject matter may be different.
Not all of them, but am I right in saying they're all American?
not all of them. I think some of them. I think Morris Massey's on there. Isn't Morris Massey on there?
No.
Maybe
so
they
I'll
are.
quickly rattle
Maybe
through
they
them.
are all American.
We have J. Ray Pence, Ralph Scott, Lloyd Lehman, and people can have a look at these if they want to. We'll try and include them in the notes. Fred Shepard, Robert Gain, Percy Bugby, James Meadle, Warren Islam, William Clark, Gordon Vickery, Keith Klinger, David Gratz, Howie McLennan, Warren Kimball, Lou Weitzman, John Byron, Francis Brannigan, James Page, Alan Brunacini, and Ronnie Coleman.
Yeah.
I think they're all
American.
They
were all. I think they're all American. Yeah.
That's a very American thing to write by them.
Yeah, very all American. Yeah. So I went back and looked at their positions, their education, their writing, their publications, and their education level, and then what it was that they were an expert in. So I identified these patterns, and part of it was most of them did most of their work after 1950. Okay. So the people in the beginning of a century have a harder time getting their work recognized because it's older. Right? After that, but all of them typically wrote more than anybody in their generation. They published more. They had higher academic degrees, and they were in positions where they tried to actually make change. All of their success was because they tried to change something that nobody else was interested in doing. So those, and they were good public speakers. They would lecture at conferences all the time. So that was the takeaway that I had, and that was kind of what I was doing in my life. You know, writing, lecturing, trying new ideas, trying new things out. And then I encouraged the fire service leaders today to try to create environments that did that for their young recruits. Because my conclusion was the leaders of the 21st century aren't even in the fire service yet. True. Right? They haven't even joined the fire service yet. So we need to make sure we have systems in place that allow people to be their best through education, through making presentations, through challenging assignments, through supporting higher education, lecturing, going to conferences, being on podcasts. I mean, I'm an old guy. There's probably a 20-something out there that has an idea that's way more cutting edge than I am. I forget the guy's name. He was a computer genius, and he was working with Google to come up with Google Glass somehow, that when you wore it, it showed you the route to the call in your Google Glass and the fire hydrants you were coming up on. And Google pulled him away from the fire service. So he left the fire service. So Google made him an offer he couldn't refuse. But there are people out there doing that.
Yeah, I know the one you're on about.
There are people,
and there's also See-Through Technology is a company that use edge detection as an example. Andrew spoke about this when he came on the podcast. They've taken, again, technology that's been around for ages. So when you redesign your kitchen, you take 7 pictures of your kitchen and it looks where all the edges is, and then it makes a virtual kitchen. And then you can tell you exactly everything you can fit in your kitchen. Yeah. The kitchen industry and everywhere else has been using this for a very, very long time. But it's basically edge detection and see-through. So the problem with thermography is it can be very inconsistent depending on the heat patterns and the thermal layers and all this sort of stuff. And there's whiteout problems, and how accurate the readings are is very difficult. But if you add the technology of see-through technology, it looks like the Matrix a little bit. So there's green lines everywhere, and you see perfect. You can see perfect in every room because all it's doing is picking up all the edges and creating a visual. But that's just one example. Sorry, see-through technology. Kurt McKenzie and Andy both spoke about it, actually. And yeah, having those people that are coming through now, creating environments for them to play around, even like you say, going to seminars, going and developing themselves, funding them through academic endeavors, because I don't think we allow for that in a lot of our budgets. Certainly in the UK, it's terrible, mate. Honestly, it's the podcast is actually a massive travesty, I would argue. It's so very sad that this thing, and I'm not saying it's a great thing, but it's gotten quite popular of recent. It's so sad that it exists outside of the fire service. So what I mean by that is, this is a private passion of mine, that seemed, and no one was doing it. No, this is the thing I wished existed when I joined. Like, I'll be totally transparent with you. I wish there was an audiobook of your book, because I find reading very difficult, and it's been very difficult for me over the past few weeks. You've been kind enough to give me quite some time to read this. I've got 7 others over there, which have been sent to me by guests as well. And I always try and ask people, is there an audio available for this, please, so that I can listen to it? Because that's how I like to learn. And we have to create, like you're saying about creating the environments for the next generation of firefighters. We have to, most firefighters won't read the debriefs. They won't read the manuals, and they won't read the books, because it's not how the new generation, for better or worse, are ingesting information. And going back to that legacy analogy, we have to, people always say, leave it better than you found it. I don't know if they use that terminology in the States. Fire service, leave it better than you found it. The very uncomfortable fact, I think, is, and I see this a lot now when people say about, oh, they put it out on LinkedIn or whatever, retiring after 30 years, really proud of everything I've done. I don't know them. Some of them I know, some of them I don't know. But I think in the quiet moments when you go to bed and you ask yourself, have I made a difference? Have I left it better than I found it? Probably not. For most people, unfortunately. I mean, they've made a difference is a scale, isn't it? So you probably were on an incident ground where a life was saved. If you were ever an operational firefighter, certainly in the UK, we're still busier than the military, as an example. You probably have been part of a life-saving operation. But you know what? Any other firefighter in that position probably would have done very similar to you. What is unique to you? What have you done? What have you done to leave it better than you found it? And I felt that wave hit me. I'm a recovering addict, and I felt that wave hit me when I set fire to my life through my addiction and nearly ruined everything, all of my personal relationships, and nearly lost my job and everything else. And I thought, I want to, like when you said about arriving on the incident ground, hitting the guy in the head, I really want to be better. And I think it aligned with me having my daughter as well. So there was a big why involved with this. Like, I wanted to be the firefighter my daughter thought I was. I really wanted to make a difference, not just say, and I wanted to make a big difference. So the podcast kind of manifested out of that, because as we allude to when I was reading those list of legends, there's a lot of this stuff in America. There's a lot of American fire service podcasts. I listened to a couple of them. America is a bigger thing, lots more funding. I'm sure you still have your challenges equal to us, but there seems to be a lot more of this out there. And all the Americans talk to Americans, and they just talk to each other. They don't tend to have a lot of international guests on. And I think, great, we're just talking in our own echo chambers all the time. I guarantee you, having spoken to a few of them, there's great experts in Germany, Australia, Canada, China, everywhere else. And I want to bring those people. I'm so grateful, especially with the greatest of respect, with your age. There's a couple of other people in your age category that I want to have on as guests before we miss the opportunity. I hope you are with us for another 30 years, sir. But we all owe a death. Yeah. It is coming to us all at some point in time. And I think to myself, I mean, Burton, if you could listen to your great-grandfather, you could read a book about him, but if you could hear him speak with the same level of reverence and passion that you have so kindly given us today, wow. If you could capture that in an audible time capsule, and I always call this a legacy resource. Like, I look forward in 20 years' time when brand new firefighters are coming in and they're listening to Burton And you may have passed by then.
Yeah, right,
and I'm
exactly
like,
right.
listen to this. I mean, hopefully go and read his book. But if you want to read it, if it's available in a PDF, if it's available in an audio, I'm like, someone should do this because we're going to have to learn these lessons again. I guarantee someone will be making the same passionate argument that you've made today on several topics in 15 years, and we'll go, yeah, Burton was saying all that.
Yeah.
But he's not here with us now. Do you know what I mean? So like, it's a horrible accusation, but you've written some great work. You've got the website. Yeah. How many people will really make that change? It's a horrible accusation to feel personally, but you've written so much great work. You've got the website, which we'll put in the links as well. You've left that there for people to learn from and hopefully people to take away from. But when you look at that legacy potential, what do you think stops people? I think a lot of people have a copy and paste career, with the greatest respect. Like, they've seen the way someone else has done it. They've gone through the same steps. They've not stepped outside of the lane like you have and gone and done the academic study and all this sort of stuff. They've just done what the service or the department told them to do, and they've stayed inside the lane, and they're perpetuating the same good and bad behaviors. Why do you do this? Why is this legacy stuff so important to you? Because it feels like it is. The fact you're even talking to me today, you don't need to talk to me. I might be wasting your goddamn time.
I can't help myself. It feels right. I can't help myself. It feels right. It is something inside of me that has to come out. And if I can find the mechanisms to let it out on a podcast, and exactly what you said, since in the last few years, I've published many of my articles in international fire magazines, not from the U.S., but from the U.K. So many of them are in there now. So I'm trying to reach a bigger, wider audience because I understand that, and some of my heroes, are UK legends, and because they were thinking the same way I'm thinking now, they were thinking that way.
But you're right, paying that forward and your sort of acknowledgement of releasing it to a wider audience keeps us out of those echo chambers, because there's fire departments all over the world doing things very differently, and we could learn from all of them. There's a cocktail to be made here of best practice, and I don't think we're there yet. Actually,
I did start recording the book for an audio version. So do you think I have a voice for audio book?
Please finish it. Yes, sir. Okay. Absolutely. Mate, when we started it 3 years ago, you listen back to it and you go, oh God, it sounds horrendous. The audio quality is not where I'd like it to be and blah, blah, blah. Don't let good be the enemy of perfect.
All right.
Because at the minute it doesn't exist. And if you record it and in a year's time you go, I want to do that again, it doesn't sound very good. Because you record it, and maybe off the back of this episode, I don't know, because I've had a lot of international guests, we'll put a link to your LinkedIn. Is it appropriate to put an email address in? Would that be appropriate?
Sure. Oh yeah.
Are you sure? I've got your email address. Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah. Just put that in. Yeah, it's fine. Oh yeah.
We'll just put that one in there. Sure. Because there's a lot of people that manifest work out of the podcast. Not that you're looking for work, but people do contact our guests. And I'm sure if you were to create an audible version of your book, you may or may not get lots of positive feedback and then go, oh, wow, there's obviously people are interested in this. And that's why I say to people, look, it's not necessarily what you're saying. It might be how you're saying it. It might be the way in which it might be because it's in an article or it's in a whatever.
Yeah.
And I know this takes longer sometimes and then I have to go back and edit it all and blah, 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 blah. But it's worth it because hopefully the large group of people that will listen to this, a percentage of them with an appetite too, will filter through and go and read the book or purchase the book or however they digest it. And I guarantee, again, by the very nature of the popularity of it's the convenience thing. It's back to that efficiency conversation.
Yeah.
People listen to this when they're driving, when they're walking the dog. When I have to read these books, I have to place myself in a position in this office where I can do that for an hour or two, and it will take longer. And then in the back of my monkey mind, ADHD brain, it's like, oh, I've got a lot of stuff to do. I need to go and do the thing. Yeah. I'm struggling to read this. I wish Burton was here just telling me, just talking to me. I know I'm creating work for you. If you never comes out, it doesn't matter. But I just think you have got a great voice for it, mate.
Well, thank you. I had the best compliment from a firefighter. He said, Bert, I never read books. but yours I keep in the bathroom. He said, I can go in the bathroom, I can read one of your essays about the time it takes me to take a dump. So that's my timing. I go in the bathroom, do my business, and I can read one of your essays. So I will get your book done. That's a Pulitzer Prize from a firefighter.
100%, because you know better than me how many subject matter experts similar to yourself won't even, this is what I always say to people, like, most people won't ever write a book.
I know.
Because it's bloody, I've not written one. I've spoke about writing one loads of times, not done it, because it's bloody hard. It takes a lot of time, and then editors and publishers and blah, blah, blah. One of the other reasons we do podcasting, I'm not audio trained. I'm a knuckle dragging firefighter, but even I can do it. Anybody could start this. It might just sound a bit rubbish the first time you do it, but people such that there's Mickey Farrell.
Writing. I think writing is so important to the construct of being a professional, because what it does, it forces you to get your thoughts in a concrete location that then another person can pick up and digest without the interference of you being there. Yes. And I think that's critical to professionalism, and it does last longer, I think, even with the digital world. We go back to papyrus in terms of how those things that people wrote down. So I think that construct of writing, and for me to be able to do it as a dyslexic, it just is icing on top of the cake to think that that my name is on a book. I mean, that's as a high school kid, I would have never dreamed that possible. As a Kentland volunteer firefighter, that would have never been possible. But the fact that God let me do this, that's just absolutely amazing, and I'm so grateful.
And it does force you. You were great there. Like, I think it was it wasn't Marilyn Monroe, it was someone else that said think in ink. It might have been her, actually.
Yeah.
But when you do put your words down, it forces you to self-reflect, and you read that back and you go, is that me? Is that what I'm about? Is that in congruence with the way I feel? Do you know what I mean? And then you forces you to reflect and reflect and reflect. Whereas a lot of this is I'm verbally vomiting, into a microphone. And I know, because when I listen back on it, I'm like, oh, Pete, you're waffling. Shut up. Just, you're absolute. And I'm like, I wouldn't put that in a book because it's just waffle. Do you know what I mean? We've been talking for over 2 hours. Wow. This 2-hour conversation, and I've loved every second of it, but it wouldn't make the book. It'd probably turn into 1 or 2 chapters, because it's like, oh, Pete, remove most of the stuff I said, because Burton brought most of the value into this conversation. I want to be respectful of your time, and I want to be respectful of my children's time as well. But I've absolutely loved our conversation today, my friend. Once more for people, we will put a link in the notes for this. But I can't save you, and I don't want to die trying. American Fire Culture, Dr. Burton A Clark. We are going to put a link for this just underneath. There will be a link to your website, American Fire Culture. There will be a link to your LinkedIn. There will be an email address and a link to the book as well. So thank you so much for your time, sir. I've really enjoyed it. Please send my love to your grandchildren, your children, and your family.
Wonderful.
Loved it, brother.
Will do. Thank you very much.
The Firefighters Podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our driving purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests. And as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means that we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, tallies, and also access to all of the incredible documents get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, then please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month, you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're in the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.